So recently, I finished Persona 5, a fantastic game. I am grateful to now understand an entirely new community and a people who cherish it. However, when I finished it and sat by myself to analyze the plot and meaning, I just ended up comparing it to Nier Automata. So, naturally I thought, since it's been a year since Nier Automata's release, why not compare its and Persona's plots and themes? And why I elevate Yoko Taro's work above Atlas's. There are spoilers in this video for both games, so obviously you should just keep watching the video. Anyways, let's move on.
Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Juliet, Juliet, wherefore art thou, Juliet?
Some JRPGs have a tendency to rely on spectacle, or at least modern JRPGs do. I suppose this could be said about movies or theatrics as well. This is perfectly fine in my opinion, as long as said art form stays so in order to keep myself from investing my emotions into it. I'm not saying that you have to write it out in bold letters, but its premise should be a clear indicator that this is not meant to be thought about in a rational way, and is for entertainment purposes.
Then I shall take thy life. Die, Romeo, thou stupid asshole! I shall make thee regret the day of thy birth!
The Japanese would never tell anybody that though, and I don't expect them to. They seem to have a method for balancing spectacle and artistic intent pretty well, in my opinion. But all art forms eventually go into one category or the other. Hence, when people think of JRPGs, they think of pretty anime boys, flashy cutscenes, ridiculous monsters, and oversized swords to cut them. Final Fantasy XIII, Monster Hunter, and Xenoblade Chronicles X tend to come to mind when I mention these things. I'm not saying that those are bad things, but tropes often define genres, and to keep something in a genre can limit its artistic intent. Limitations can be great for creativity, but are terrible for conveying certain messages. Giving yourself only a pen and paper to greet your friend is certainly fun and interesting, but you would lose the emotional context with the words and pictures that you would have if you had just said, "Hey, how's it going?" Or, "Hey, how's it going?" Or, "Hey, how's it going?" Or, you get the idea. The emotions define the intent. Sure, it's not the most fun way one could receive that message, but it leaves more to be desired and room to expand upon further to create a cohesive idea. I expound on this because I think Persona 5's plot understood this until the very end.
It's catching up to us! We're running here for bitch!
Hold on, turn into a car already! I know!
Both Persona 5 and Nier lacked in neither artistic intent nor entertainment quality in my opinion. In fact, they excelled in both. Persona understood its tone fantastically and kept its dark themes riding side by side its upbeat and stylish romping gameplay to invoke a world which reflects how the player would want to see its own, which is great. It makes changes of heart super emotional and keeps you wanting to move further as well as enjoy playing a really fun game. Funnily enough, it's when these two themes decide to merge together in the final act does that illusion fall apart. In the story, the metaverse begins to merge with the real world because Yaldabaoth, or False Igor, decides that humanity cannot better themselves after watching you fail to keep the public from acknowledging Shido as a criminal and seeing the Phantom Thieves as heroes. But really, he planned you to fail from the start in order to materialize into the god. Phantom Thieves, while at first feeling defeated, soon begin to realize they need to save it from the evil god's machinations. When they fight him and come to the moment they realize that they cannot kill him, Yaldabaoth tells them that the public's lack of faith in the Phantom Thieves is the reason why they no longer belong in this world, since they are now unpredictable.
Since you've been forsaken by the world, there is nowhere that you can belong.
We can't lose! like this?
If we lose, the world is... I need to get back up.
My strength.
I can't go on. Is this it?
Not even one sliver of unpredictability can be permitted under my control.
I guess it was impossible in the end. It was fun while it lasted, though. It's humans against a god, after all.
Do you hear the voices of the masses? They mock you for revolting against a god.
This theme is further confirmed previously when they begin to disappear from the real world and wake up in the Velvet Room, as mementos is the cognition of the public. However, one person or two, depending on your confidant level with Mishima, begin to openly encourage the Phantom Thieves, and then the entire public begins to root for you in order to stop the horror the city had become. This is when the Phantom Thieves decide to stand up and fight him further. After the mass approval, Joker's persona Arson transforms into the extremely powerful Saitanel, which Morgana explains is a demon lord?
I see. If a god plays naughty, then it's a demon lord's duty to punish him. What better way is there for a finale as a trickster?
Okay. And proceeds to shoot Yaldabaoth in the face, thus ending the Phantom Thieves Christmas special.
Well, I suppose this marks the end of our production of Romeos and Juliets. Please watch your step as you exit. If you'd like to have your card stamped, please come this way.
All you did was surround yourself with people you could use, solely for some easy money.
And you think you're the only one who's got to deal with being labeled? Me and all these other guys, we're all fighting against that.
But don't worry. You'll finally have a place you belong. Somewhere you can make amends. For the rest of your life.
We're gonna do something about that distorted heart of yours, free of charge.
I'm glad you understand. Now hurry up and return to the real Kaneshiro.
Seriously? You guys don't have any tact. Especially with that incredible power. These palaces could net you loads of cash. You could do whatever you wanted to people's hearts.
We're not like you.
Where do you find meaning in that naive sense of justice?
If we look at the fan site approval ratings, it almost quite literally went from 0 to 100 in an instant. It turns everything we've done before on its head, and it did not really sit well with me. It seems strange to have the public all of a sudden believe in the Phantom Thieves, especially if they would have known that Yaldabaoth was here because of Joker's actions. I understand that it is the Phantom Thieves that caused the public to rebel against Yaldabaoth, but I am shocked that the Phantom Thieves do not sympathize more with the god, despite him lying about his true identity in order to mask the true Igor. The Phantom Thieves act like they are more just in their actions, but they both want society and adults to change for the better. The only difference is that Yaldabaoth has lost hope and wanted them to be destroyed, which sounds like a big difference at first, but the Phantom Thieves saw firsthand the horrors of humanity, and is the reason why some became Phantom Thieves in the first place.
And now that the foolishness of man has been proven, it is the administrator's duty to purge them.
You kidding? This is just some kind of rigged game you started.
The foolish masses merely spread indolent thoughts and force the progress of society backward. If left to humanity, the world would slowly meet its demise. Rehabilitation is impossible now.
That doesn't mean humans are evil, though.
Indeed, there are many upstanding citizens. However, they merely take the soul path before them. The act of making decisions is accompanied by nothing but pain. Even if a cliff of ruin lie ahead, these lemmings would march on without a second thought.
Was that an act Mona put you up to? You know, the beauty thingy.
That was, I was trying to be a heroine of justice.
Is that a joke?
You moron! Ever since I was young, people around me have never seen me for who I really am. They would be kind to me just to please my father, and would get money and presents in exchange. Adults, teachers, even friends. It seemed like everyone smiled at me for their own personal gain.
If I'm to steal ideas, it's much easier robbing the future of brats who won't talk back than adults. It's thanks to you that I came up with the idea. You have my gratitude.
Yusuke?
I thank you, Madarame. Every reason for me to forgive you has disappeared without a trace at this very moment. You aren't some rotten artist. You're a despicable fiend who wears the skin of an artist.
For the Phantom Thieves, it was the reason for changing evil hearts like Kamoshida, Madarame, and Kaneshiro. For the evil god, it was to inflate the Phantom Thieves' ego so that he could shift the blame when things turned south, and ultimately create his existence as the collective desires of humanity. Despite acting like they were myths and legends, both Yaldabaoth and the Phantom Thieves were slaves to one thing, whether they liked it or not: society. They might have not cared about what society thought of them, but it's ultimately what saved the Phantom Thieves and what ended Yaldabaoth in the end. Akechi was the only one to reject society completely, only caring for his revenge against Shido and his willingness to do it alone, even though all he wanted was a friend. He calls the Phantom Thieves trash of society, but that's only an insult since he cares about what they think of him. So despite its 100-hour game time, this one part felt completely rushed in my opinion, and when looking at emotional intent, it feels subpar of Persona's starting themes of freedom and rebellion against evil adults. Although the Phantom Thieves no longer cared for society's attention by the end, they seemed to ignore the fact that it was society that saved them, because it turned out that society valued freedom and rebellion as well, and did not want to be controlled once they realized it. Of course, they had to deal with Yaldabaoth. Anybody in their situation would try to stop him. But once it was all over, it felt like the Phantom Thieves were powerless to begin with, since they were part of a game they could not control, thus making rebellion and freedom impossible until they did what was required of them. And doing what is required is not rebellion at all. I think the majority of this is intentional, however, and I'll explain why in a bit.
So,
What is it?
that machine had some pretty weird things to say, huh? It's almost like it had actual emotion.
The machines don't have feelings. You said that yourself.
Yeah, I guess.
Now, Nier Automata has a very different idea of what Persona 5 was going for, but they actually deal with the same issue. Its themes are centered around humanity and what humanity is and should be. In Route A of the game, it carries you throughout each kind of human endeavor that has been implemented and has ultimately failed. The reason for this is not because it was the administrators or the machine's fault or misstep. It was humanity's, from which they learned it from. But how are they to know any better? Adam himself said the core of humanity is conflict, but only from observation. The reason why our two androids were able to properly interpret these events is because 2B and 9S know humanity is not like that, for they created them after all, regardless if they were made from the same parts as a machine. As for the machines, they did not know their creator. In fact, the antagonists, Adam and Eve, sought to and did kill the remaining aliens that created them. Dismissing them as worthless, they focused their attention on the remaining humans left on the moon, even though 9S discovered they were dead all along. They wanted to be like humans because they were the most complex form of being to Adam, and Eve just wanted to see his brother happy. Once you stop them, Yorha begins its all-out ascent to reclaim Earth for something that no longer exists. But unfortunately, the machine virus entered Yorha even after killing Eve. It entered the Yorha server and took over all Yorha units, including 2B, whom A2 killed to keep the virus from spreading. 9S now has nothing, just like A2. What 9S fails to realize in the end is that A2 really was trying to save him, but 9S wanted to kill A2 and all machines so badly that the real truth of 2B's task to kill him, Yorha's plan to keep the androids from dying without knowledge of the truth, and the fact that a fraction of human data still was on the moon, were meaningless to him. He wanted justice for 2B, but A2 knew that 2B could only be avenged by destroying the tower in which the virus manifested to corrupt the remaining human data, which 9S does not care about. 9S in Route D wants to destroy his love for humanity due to the pain it has caused him. However, when he dies by falling on A2's blade, his memories are again transferred to the machine network. There he finds Adam, Eve, and realizes he never had any real reason for living, and wanted to know the truth about humanity, just as the machines did. But Pada 042 and 153, out of love for their androids, performed a data salvage and recreated and rebuilt 2B and 9S, so they could have the chance to start again, so that they could live together despite being told to delete their data.
His Majesty hasn't grown at all. No, not in the slightest. How can we make him bigger? I don't know. We're too dumb to figure that out. Sure is a cutie, though.
Already as I described this story, I see now why Persona did not resonate with me as well as Nier did. Nier Automata, when played fully, automatically assumes humanity's desires as folly. The game doesn't tell you this either, it shows you. The machines uncover bit by bit the grief of humanity, form an esteemed hatred for their killers, disregarding Pascal's village of course, they adopted pacifism, but they formed families.
Well, machines can't really make children. Neither can androids, now that I think about it. 2B? Little help here?
Huh? You're the chatty one. Work it out.
Ooh. Wow, it's getting late. Let's get you home already.
Entertainment.
What the?
Wow, this is weird.
Let's be happy together, together, together.
Governments.
What is with these guys?
Religion.
His wondrous grace has become a god. His wondrous grace has become a god. His wondrous grace has become a god. We as well shall become as gods. We as well shall become as gods. All of you shall become as gods. All of you shall become as gods.
And failed at creating meaning from all of them. On the surface, they think they are embodying the best parts of human society, but as Adam says, not a fraction of life exists within them.
I strive to attain nothing less than the essence of humanity itself. We machines exist in a connected network. We are immortal, invincible, and yet, within all those infinite bits of data, there exists not even the nearest flicker of being, of life, death, even the concept of death has no meaning to us.
I forgot who said this, but to paraphrase what they said, quote, This is the great irony of Nier Automata. There are no more humans alive, yet everything is trying to be human. Therefore, the question is, what is humanity? According to the game, it's the heart to carve a future for yourself, contrary to what you've been given.
Did the data salvage restore all of their past memories?
Yes.
And are those recovered parts of the same design as previous ones?
Yes.
Then, won't that simply lead us to the same conclusion as before?
I cannot deny the possibility. However, the possibility of a different future also exists. A future is not given to you. It is something you must take for yourself.
This was something the machines could not do, as they had nothing and could only replicate what they were given. And though they grew and evolved, Pascal was the only machine smart enough to learn and care for its own kind and understand that they were machines. But even he chose to forget the horrors of his decisions.
A2, I need your aid. I cannot live with this heartbreak inside me. I need you. I need you to delete my memories. And if not, then I need you to kill me.
Unlike 2B, 9S, and A2, they possess the will to deal with their choices and have faith in the most illogical things. 2B had faith in A2 to take care of 9S. A2 still had faith in humanity and in the world, and 9S believed killing A2 could end his pain. Even Pod 042 and 153 had faith in 2B and 9S that they could make a better future for themselves if they got a second chance. And even Devla and Popla chose to risk their lives in hopes 9S would complete his mission. They chose to rebel against what they were given and create something beautiful out of nothing, like their creators did.
Tell me where to find the virus corrupting 9S.
Affirmative. Your high unit A2. Core data for 9S is stored ahead. Alert. Severe virus corruption. Probability of successful deletion extremely low.
I think I know a way.
The idea under consideration is not recommended. This pod is a Yorha tactical support unit. As such, it cannot approve of actions that would damage its supported unit.
You're not so bad, Pod. You know that?
This leads to the great variable that separates Persona 5 from Nier Automata, in my opinion. Persona's rebellion is still trapped under the opinion of society, while Nier's rebellion states that all of society is worthless. Nier Automata says that true humanity does not exist in human society, while Persona says true humanity is going against society. These fundamental differences are key to understanding the artistic intent of both games. Nier's rebellion affects internally, and Persona's is externally. Both, I think, are brilliant topics, and I think both handled them very well. My issue is the emotional intent of Persona 5. It dealt with many issues and handled them all very fairly and respectfully. It is simply not my perception that Persona 5's capitalized on its themes as well as Nier does, because it lacks emotional intent. There was not really an emotion to condone the actions of the Phantom Thieves. They did great things, they protected and saved many people. After all, Morgana hired them to be the good guys, but nobody, not even Morgana, knew why until the very end. So when Lavenza explained that it was all planned from the start, the messages I got from the game is finish the game and be rewarded with the power of friendship, which is basically a JRPG, granted, but not what I wanted from the story. To feel sympathetic about the final boss in a relatively upbeat game is not what I call consistency in tone, and it made the feeling of the ending just feel cheesed out. If killing a god with a bullet from a demon lord summoned within your personality wasn't enough cheese for you. I'm not saying that Persona 5's idea and conception were done poorly. The game is fantastic, it's stylish, fun, heartwarming, and makes you think. In fact, the rest of the game sticks with its theme of outward rebellion and has loads of emotional messages. I just feel the ending could be handled a little more seriously is all, and not be treated like a spectacle like most JRPGs tend to do. This is not to say Nier Automata doesn't rely on spectacle either. It has a giant robot fish, for crying out loud. But Nier's story reflects on its themes well enough to justify the spectacle as artistic intent. Persona, while it has powerful themes, sacrificed the tone of those themes at the end to justify the spectacle of winning against a god. Which in my opinion is unfortunate because even though Nier Automata is an infinitely more depressing game, I honestly believe it has a more positive message than Persona 5. Persona says you can always change the world, but Nier says that you don't need the world to live a happy life. You just need each other. This is just my opinion though. I know the Persona fandom will certainly have something to say about this. There are some things I know I miss, but I just don't know how to put it into words right now. There is also an extreme bias in my opinion as well. No, excuse me. Nier Automata is one of my favorite games of all time. So Persona 5 already had a disadvantage, but I'm happy to report that I'm officially a Persona fan now. Keep in mind, I only compared one facet of both these games. If you want to see my opinions on something else, please let me know. But until then, farewell, and enjoy the rest of your day.